I have no idea whose job it was to balance the minigames of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but please, for the love of God, no more minigames, please! Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the highly anticipated second entry to the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy created by Square Enix. Rebirth is still your ideal Final Fantasy VII Remake, but this time, they seemingly open up the game, kind of rebirthing what an ideal Final Fantasy VII Remake can be, while still keeping it a sequel to the first game story-wise. This game started winning awards even before its release for Most Anticipated Game of 2024 at the Game Awards, but did live up to the hype. How much did they rebirth the Final Fantasy VII formula, and how well did I like the game overall? Let's find out. But first and foremost, if you've been watching my content for a little bit, please consider subscribing. I post content weekly, and you don't want to miss a thing. Thanks. Story. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as I've stated earlier, is the second entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, taking place directly after the events of the first game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and is told from the perspective of multiple different characters. The main protagonist of the story, Cloud Strife, a prior Shinra infantryman turned mercenary, who's teamed up with the eco-terrorist group Avalanche in hopes of saving the planet and the people who inhabit it from Shinra Electric Power Company and his arch-nemesis, Sephiroth. Shinra hopes to harness the planet's lifestream, Mako, to use it as an energy source. Kinda similar to how we use oil or gasoline. But Sephiroth's intentions are far more sinister, with him hoping to unite the planet to achieve greater power within himself. The beginning of Rebirth does a fantastic job in exploring Cloud and his companions' backstories, with the primary emphasis on Tifa and Sephiroth shining light on their history with Cloud, with the flashback segments always having great payoffs. Whether it's explaining why Cloud cares so deeply for Tifa, or why he has a fiery hatred for Sephiroth, every story beat lands. The writing is top tier. The game even spends time expanding on Zack Fair's character quite a bit, giving him a more prominent role this time around within the story compared to the original, and personally, I really enjoyed the way all this was handled by Square Enix. Each and every one of Cloud's companions gets their time to shine as well within the main story. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a massive game, and it doesn't hold back when it comes to expanding on what was told before. If Final Fantasy VII Remake left you with a feeling of wanting more, then Rebirth will scratch that itch by a mile, by covering far more story content from the original than Remake did. Remake was only the opening hours of Final Fantasy VII, telling the story of Midgard and nothing else. Rebirth, on the other hand, is a story that spans multiple areas and multiple timelines, ensuring you're in for one hell of an epic journey. Everything is so wacky and so Final Fantasy. It's a product of its time with a modern day paint job, but it's exactly how the story should be told. Graphics. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and let me tell you, it harnesses every inch of what that console has to offer. It's by far one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen at times, and definitely the best looking Final Fantasy game to date. The game has a graphics mode that sports 4K definition and 30 frames per second, and a performance mode that has 60 frames per second with a much lower resolution. Typically, when I play games on the PlayStation 5, I always go with the performance modes, but I don't know what it is with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but something is terribly wrong with the game's performance mode, making the graphics in the game look watered down and unpolished. So naturally I gravitated towards the graphics mode with this one, and as always, after about 30 minutes to an hour of gaming, I got used to the lower frame rate. And now, I find it the better option between the two modes. Hopefully we'll get a patch down the line that'll fix the performance mode. Besides that, at times, the textures aren't as crisp as I would like them to be, especially with the draw distance. Majority of the times, the game's backdrops look outstanding. But every once in a while, you'll come across an area that you can tell the developers intended to be a beautiful scenery in game, and the textures just make the backdrops look flat and watered down with the coloring. And it's weird, because you'll even find this in certain areas such as the photo mode areas, which you're meant to take screenshots at in game, and it really just harms my overall enjoyment with that feature. Overall though, most areas are executed flawlessly, and what they achieved with this game is something very special. The art direction is more lighthearted compared to something like Final Fantasy XVI, and it's why I enjoy Final Fantasy VII so much. It's anime as fuck, and it's the perfect mix with the realism the game presents, creating what I consider Final Fantasy's magnum opus, graphically. Combat. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's combat is a hybrid between traditional melee combat and the ATB active time battle system that was originated in Final Fantasy VII Remake, making it the perfect combination between the old and the new. But if you're also a sucker for the original style of play, then you can opt out for the classic mode, which automates the melee combat and puts a heavier emphasis on commands. Which is great if you're a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, but if you're an old piece of shit like me, then you probably would have wanted a turn-based mode instead. Anyways, in Rebirth, you'll control Cloud Strife for a majority of your playthrough, and he'll be the party leader, meaning each and every encounter you'll start in control of Cloud. But during combat, you're free to swap to whatever character is best for that specific encounter, and they even make it possible for you to swap out your party leader to whoever you like, besides specific chapters and quest lines. Each and every character in the game has their own special way to play and identity, with my favorites to play as being Barret, Tifa, and Yuffie. Each character in the game gets a unique ability that's activated by using the triangle button, such as Cloud's Punisher mode and Tifa's Uppercut and Unbridled Strength ability. The majority of these are the crutch of each character's combat, with some being just downright overpowered. Depending on who you're playing as, you'll use that character's form of basic attacks to build up the ATB gauge, and once you fill up at least one bar, it'll put the game into a slow motion pause state, and you'll be able to select commands to use weapon abilities, magic, and items, with tons of options to choose from depending on how you build your characters. But I'll cover all of that in Materias later on in the video. Beyond this, there's something totally new that was added to Rebirth's combat called Synergy Skills and Synergy Abilities. Each ATB gauge that you use will add a bar to the game's Synergy gauge, where you can decide to either use a Synergy Skill, which are singular attacks or buffs for a character, or the incredibly strong Synergy Abilities, which are essentially team-up attacks that deal tons of damage and will consume multiple bars from the Synergy gauge, from both characters in that particular attack. It's a nice touch that makes the combat more fast-paced and cinematic. Blocking within Rebirth is even a more valuable tool, and if you get a perfect block, then you can build up an enemy's pressure gauge to be able to stagger them to deal increased damage. Red 13 even has a unique ability that's centered around blocking specifically with Vengeance mode, and once activated, it turns into Siphon Fang, which allows you to spam his Sidewinder ability, slamming down fire attacks while siphoning HP for Red 13. And in the right hands, it can be incredibly strong. Now, to top all of this off, we have the Limit Gauge and Materia summons. These are essentially the strongest attacks and abilities within the game, and they're only able to be used once per fight. To build up to the Limit Gauge, you'll practically have to eat shit and stagger your enemies repeatedly until you fill up this bar to use this overwhelming attack, and the same goes for the Materia summons. But after you summon one of these monsters, you can use the ATB bar to use one of their special attacks for a time being, until they're fully charged up, setting off their ultimate attack. Overall, the combat in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is far more refined than Remake, and in my opinion, it's the best combat that Final Fantasy has to offer, setting an incredibly high standard for the future of the series. It's so fun, so responsive, action-packed, and it's cinematic as hell, and honestly, I don't know if they'll be able to top this. Good luck. Gameplay and exploration. Where Rebirth really shines as not only a Final Fantasy game, but as a continuation of Final Fantasy VII, is with its exploration and core gameplay loop. Remake had the traditional corridor and combat-centric gameplay, and it was a much shorter experience being quite linear. Rebirth, on the other hand, kept all the best aspects from Remake, but opened it up to become a gigantic open-world game with a Final Fantasy spin, and it's what I've always envisioned the future of the series should be since the release of Final Fantasy XV. A game I didn't click with at all, and in fact, I didn't even finish it. Square Enix still keeps the best aspects of Remake though. You'll still have some linear sections, but majority of the game is segmented into 6 huge open areas that are covered with your traditional Fog of War style maps, and reveal itself the more you explore. You'll climb towers to reveal more points of interest on the map, search for collectibles, play minigames, and kill mini-bosses. It has everything you'd expect in a PS5 exclusive open world game in 2024. But what makes this special in this instance is all the things that makes this a Final Fantasy game. Some of it bad, but majority of it is fantastic, and I had so much fun exploring Rebirth. They even keep the same bench rest stations from Remake, but this time, if you stumble across them in free roam, then you'll be met with a small Jacobo. And let me tell you, they are cute as shit. They'll show you the way to a broken rest station that you can fix to become fast travel points from then on, with the one major difference being that in order to use that rest station, you'll need a cushion on hand, or else without that you won't be able to rest, keeping it more in line with modern day open world games in form, but still retaining some consequence for resting in the wild, so it doesn't make the game too easy. Although my entire playthrough I never ran out of cushions, but I do understand what they were going for. My one major complaint with the way the game's structured though, is with the FaceTime with Chadley. I enjoyed getting my world intel, turning it into Chadley for materia, and fighting in a simulation battle arena. But for the love of God, why is the game essentially one giant Chadley simulation? He's constantly calling you between everything you do in game, and dead ass, they turn him into a main character this time around, after only just being revealed in Remake. His conversations are not only annoying, they kill the flow of gameplay. Besides that, the side quests were almost all fantastic and felt important to the game's overall story. Some could get a little fetch questy and grindy at times, especially the ones that you can't skip that force you into mini-games, but I'll have more on that later on in the video. Now, regarding the game's traversal, you can now jump and vault over hills and items within the world, and you can ride buggies, segways, and Jacobos this time around. As you progress through the game, you'll obtain multiple Jacobos that are capable of traversing the terrain differently, such as climbing hills, floating, swimming, or gliding, and they even sport different colors depending on where you're at within the game, and you can even personalize them by collecting clothes, making them fresh as fudden. When Square Enix announced that they're making Final Fantasy VII a trilogy of games, and they dubbed the second entry Rebirth, I always wondered what that truly meant to them, but now we finally know. They wanted to continue the story in the Final Fantasy VII lore, while rebirthing and reimagining the core gameplay loop to the standards of the PS5 and open world games in 2024, and in my opinion, it's a mission accomplished. If they could learn one thing from this entry though, it would be to refine the bloat within the game, and its length, specifically with narrowing down the minigames. If they can do that for the third entry, then I have no doubt that they can achieve a perfect product, but as of right now, it's close but no cigar. Minigames. Now, for my least favorite aspect of Rebirth, the minigames. I won't lie, I don't have much good to say here. I think there's far too many, and my playthrough took around 120 to 150 hours, and no joke, 50 to 60 hours of that playtime was with the minigames. You could say that's a good problem to have, or maybe I should have just skipped them, but a lot of these games have important items locked behind them, or they're just flat out a part of the game's progression, making skipping them a bad move or impossible. I feel like whoever's job it was to create these minigames and balance them at Square Enix didn't care about their quality at all. Because we all know that they definitely didn't call out of work. There's so freaking many of them. A lot of them were just not fun to play, feeling like bloat being incredibly easy, or were just difficult to a toxic degree, with the worst offenders being the late game piano songs, Yuffie de Jacobo, like seriously, screw that game, Crunch Off with Tifa, and the bloated simulations. Honestly, they shoved these down your throat around every corner. They did have some highlights though, such as Red 13's Wild Run, the Frog Jump, Jacobo Racing, and the one and only Queen's Blood. Personally, I loved Queen's Blood. I think they created something special with this card game, and I always enjoyed a new match, but I will say, without Queen's Blood in the game, my playthrough would be much shorter, so maybe they could slim down some of that the next time around. For what it's worth, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's minigames were top of the line. When they're good, they are fantastic, but when they're bad, they're also really bad. Maybe it's a skill issue, but I will say, whatever the case, the game just has far too many of them, so by the end of the game, my tolerance for bullshit was much shorter than it was when I first started, and hopefully next time, they'll learn their lesson and strike a perfect balance. Characters and RPG elements. The core characters and build crafting from Remake obviously returns here. You're still playing as Cloud, Tifa, Barret, and Aerith, but this time out the gate, you start with a fully playable Red 13, and they even give you access to a fully playable Sephiroth in the Nibelheim flashback sequence. And let me tell you, he's the definition of a power fantasy. Plus Yuffie, from Remake's Integrate DLC, returns as a playable character as well, along with a new furry friend, Kate Sith, but far later into the game. So all in all, the game has a decent offering of characters to choose from, and considering all their playstyles are totally different from one another, it opens up a ton of avenues in the customization aspect of this game. Just like Remake, majority of the game's character customization comes in the form of slotting materials into your weapons and armlets. You'll find materials either around the world, win them in minigames, or you could buy them from shops. They'll give you perks and abilities such as a cure ability to heal people in your party, or give you access to tons of magic such as fire, ice, wind, and thunder abilities. There's tons of ways to mix and match materials, and this is one of the things I love so much about Final Fantasy VII as a whole. Chadley even offers unique materials that can only be unlocked through simulation fights, such as summon materials, as well as special weapon abilities that can only be used on one character at a time, making these ones incredibly rare. Besides this, they have accessories that you can slot that add other opportunities for perk bonuses to make your characters even stronger. Majority of what I just explained was present in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but what's exclusive to Rebirth is their new upgrade system. The game's added individual levels for characters as well as a party level for your party as a whole. The higher your party level, the more perks you have access to. These unlock passive bonuses, as well as more synergy abilities, synergy skills, new limit breaks, and buffs to magic. It's an incredibly important aspect of character customization, and points are few and far between, limited to leveling up or fighting Maganata books around the world, primarily through shops and minigames, so you won't be able to purchase everything. But they do offer a way to wipe the slate clean and rebuild your characters if you end up making mistakes along the way. Lastly, I should mention that Sid and Vincent Valentine are present in this game, but they're not playable additions to the team. I figured this would be the case considering we all knew we were going to get a third game, and honestly, it was for the best. This game is massive, offers a ton of new things to do and play, and it doesn't need anything else running up the length or making it bulkier. I'm excited to play with these two characters, but when they get the attention they deserve in the third and final entry. Shoot, they could even make it a DLC. Enemy variety and bosses. If there's one thing this game excelled at, it was enemy variety and bosses. Each and every region has its fair share of 15 to 18 new enemy types that they add to the game. Some of which are repeats from Remake, but majority of them are brand new enemies, and they even go as far as adding elemental variants and stronger versions that fight and act as brand new enemies, besides some attack patterns and cosmetics. Boss fights are about as badass and cinematic as you would expect from a Final Fantasy game, and boss mechanics are always different, making finding that boss's particular weakness in the game incredibly important. I will say that each and every time I stumbled upon a new enemy, and I assessed them for their weakness, I always enjoyed looking them up in the enemy intel screen to get a closer look at them because they've done such a great job on enemy design this time around. Of course, fighting the materia summons and story bosses were the biggest challenges, some even taking a few tries depending on the difficulty you choose, but I never felt like it was ever too much to manage. Fights were always fun, and after defeating something extraordinary, I felt this overwhelming feeling of accomplishment, and that's how a great game should make you feel, and overcoming the monsters in Rebirth definitely achieved that for me. Game length. Now here's where I might get a little bit controversial for some. This game was just entirely too long for me. I'm sure some would say that a game of this caliber, that's a great problem to have, but for me, it's just doing entirely too much. After I've started chapter 12 around 125 hours or so, this game was just lagging on forever. As of writing this, I still haven't beaten Rebirth in full. I'm a busy man, I work full time, and I have around 140 hours in this game at chapter 13, and I'm still not done. But I felt like I've done and seen enough to give my honest take on my adventure so far. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Rebirth is a massive game, and I enjoyed it so much, but I can't help but feel like this game would have benefited from shaving down some of the bulk, and taking out a bunch of the minigames. As I felt like I was nearing the end of my journey in Rebirth, by collecting all the world intel in all the regions, I completed all side quests and all minigames, and I was ready to move on to chapter 12. The game pulled a rug right from under me, and added more quests and minigames to all the regions in the game again. And by that point, I was just exhausted. I was the definition of defeated. But I want to see the ending, and I'm a completionist, so I'm going to push through my fatigue and see this through, regardless how long it takes. I just hope that in the third and final entry that they'll take a more minimalistic approach to what they've created this time around, because Remake was too short, but Rebirth was an overcorrection. For the average player, you'll probably clock in around 80 hours on the low end and 150 on the high end, and I'm sure it could get even longer depending on how you play. There's tons to love here, and I have no doubt that you'll enjoy your time with Rebirth, but maybe come prepared for the length and you'll be just fine. Overall, 9 out of 10. Playing through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is no doubt a gaming experience I'll never forget. Majority of what they have to offer in this entry is fantastic, and will blow you away. I had so much fun playing through this game, and maybe if they slimmed down about 20 to 50 hours off this game, I never would have reached any sort of fatigue. My main issue with this game comes in the form of its minigames, and it's the primary reason I didn't give this game a 10 out of 10. There's just far too many to an annoying degree, and some of them have dog shit balancing. Like laughably bad. Yuffie. Not to mention, the issues I had with the game's performance mode, which is typically my preferred way to play, and I had to opt out because of how terrible it was. But all in all, the fidelity mode worked fine, and I got used to the 30 frames. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a near-perfect adventure, and is a major improvement over Remake. Square Enix has improved and refined the story and combat, and I'm excited to finally finish the story in a couple years when they release the final chapter. The future is looking bright, and considering the length and size of this game, I mean, we're talking around 145 gigabytes. I wouldn't count on any DLC, but you never know. Square Enix is unpredictable at times, and if they do bring us a DLC, then please, give us Vincent. Now thank you guys so much if you stayed the entire time. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth reimagined what we even thought was possible with a Final Fantasy VII Remake, making it bigger and better in every way possible. All they'd have to do is shave down some of that fat and they'll have a perfect storm for the next entry. But let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this. Have you guys finished the game yet? What do you guys think about the mini games? And let me know if you guys are excited for the future of Final Fantasy VII. Let me know all of it in the comment section. Now remember to like, comment, subscribe, do anything you guys can to help me. I am just one guy and I make these videos because it is my passion. So thank you very much. Have a nice day. This has been Drew Spacely. Peace. Oh shit, sorry about that peace sign, guys. All this anime shit is turning me south. Sorry, one more thing. I wasted a lot of time and energy making this video right here, so please, go check it out.